Hello viewers, welcome to week 5, lecture 3 of Swayam course on 20th century literary criticism and theory part 1. I am Ashish Kumar Pathak, assistant professor, Department of English, Banaras Hindu University, and in this lecture I am going to talk about uh, Claude Lévi-Strauss and how his structural study of anthropology, or how his correlating anthropology with linguistics was very instrumental in the rise of this movement called structuralism. As we also know that how in 1941, when Roman Jakobson, at the outset of the Second World War, moves from Prague to the US, and he meets Claude Lévi-Strauss. These two thinkers, they find that their methods of studies, they have striking similarities. Though Jakobson had talked about this relationship between linguistics and poetics, you know, Strauss had worked on establishing the relationship between linguistics and anthropology. However, they find similarities in their methods, and in this way, they gave a momentum to this movement. So, what is special about Claude Lévi-Strauss? That how he applies various principles of Saussure's structural linguistics to the study of anthropology, right? So, in this way, he tries to apply those methods of linguistics to various, ideas such as kinship relationships, myths, study of preparation of foods, and many other things. So, we can find that in this way, structuralism becomes an attempt to give an objective account of all social and cultural practices. Structuralism views literature as a second order signifying system that uses the first order signifying system of language as a medium. And in this way, these structuralists believe that literature should be analyzed on the model of linguistic theory. What we find that what is unique about Saussure, that Saussure adds many new dimensions, or he adds many correctives to the opinions of American structural linguistics, such as Franz Boas, Edward Sapir, or Leonard Bloomfield, and B.L. Wolff, right? And in this way, we find that in America, these linguistics were already, trying to understand or exploring the relationship between human beings, the languages that they speak, and the way they have formed social institutions. So, in this way, we find that this marriage of anthropology and linguistics was already hinted in works of Boas or Sapir or Wolff. However, there were many problems with those studies. That is what uh, Claude Lévi-Strauss points out, and he works on that. For example, Traeger and Smith's book Outline of English Structure was very important book in that direction. So, these thinkers believe that a culture comes to terms with nature by means of encoding through language. So, social behavior constitutes culture like encoding on the model of language. So, in this way, social behavior is very much studied as language is studied. So, the structuring of language, the way it has its relationship with intrinsic laws. Similarly, these anthropologists are also trying to explore those things. The important works by Claude Lévi-Strauss are Structural Anthropology that he published in 1958, The Savage Mind that came out in 1962, and Myth and Meaning, and that came out in 1978. If we look at the works of Strauss, we'll find that at the back of his mind, Vico's theories are always there. Like in the first chapter, we talked about Vico and how Vico's ideas embodied in his book, The New Science, they were very instrumental in, in laying the foundation of this movement called structuralism. So Levi-Strauss is always influenced by those ideas, particularly by the idea that how these primitive societies, because Claude Levi-Strauss is an anthropologist and he is studying human beings or human societies as they existed in pre-industrial or pre-literate times. So he is also interested in primitive men, and as Vico had said, that how these primitive men possess the kind of poetic wisdom in their response to nature, in their response to environment. We find that there is a poeticity, the way they use language in a creative way, as manifested in various myths that they have evolved, or various fables or stories or ballads they have evolved. So in this way, this idea, very much at the back of Strauss's thinking. And the other thing is that not only these men made those institutions and structures in their attempt to impose structure on the chaotic mass of reality and society that they saw around us, but also how these human beings are made by, in turn, those human institutions. So this reciprocal relationship between man and society, or what we can say nature and culture, that is of great significance. For example, not only Strauss, Karl Marx also said that men make their own histories, but they do not know that they are making it. So similarly, human beings have made those structures and they do not know they are making it. In a way, these structuralists are also making this point that structural thinking is very innate to human beings. That is how it is found in primitive societies, and that is how it can be observed in your modern sciences. This view will only be challenged during this post-structuralism, or when these theories like postmodernism or reconstruction, they emerge. However, here we find that the most significant thing about Strauss, that Strauss applies linguistic data to non-linguistic disciplines, right? So in this way, he considers language as a prototype of cultural phenomena. And as language exists, similarly, all forms of social life are established and perpetuated. As we find that these ideas are expressed in one of his early works, Tristis Tropiques. So, here how he is talking about the genuinely constitutive elements of what appears as disparate and shapeless mass phenomena. And in doing this, this study of phoneme, or what we call phonological revolution, was very handy at the hands of Levi-Strauss, right? The most remarkable thing about Strauss was his study of, kinship relationship. He always looks at constituent elements of phenomena not as intrinsic discrete entities, but contrastive relationships like phoneme structures in language. For example, in our lecture on Ferdinand de Saussure, we noticed that when Saussure is talking about syntagmatic or associative and that associative and syntagmatic relationship of words or language, there, or diachronic and synchronic study of language, there we find that how Saussure was also talking about differences. In language, there are no positive meanings, only differences. That, words convey their meaning by a sort of negative difference, not having a positive quality of meaning in them. So this contrastive relationship is very important, right? We had seen that how in language, sentences, axes of combination and axes of selection, they work along various clusters. And how contrast among those clusters, complex relationship among those clusters, that is generative of meaning. Similarly, Levi-Strauss tries to study kinship in that way. He says that kinship terms, they can be treated as phonemes in language, and he says that they get meaning only when they are integrated to the structure, a larger structure of elementary kinship, right, where opposition and correlation, two principles, are very important. So in this way, he shows his disagreement with B.L. Wolff's system, and he calls it an erroneous system because it only focuses on the empirical data, atomistic data. It only is concerned with parts. It does not talk about the relationship of those parts with the whole of reality. And in this way, Levi-Strauss is adding a corrective to Wolff's ideas. Strauss goes on to say that each system, whether it is kinship relations or food, preparation of food, or political ideology, or marriage ritual, or even cooking, he says that they are partial expression of the total culture. Total culture can be taken as a gigantic language, and these various phenomena such as kinship, food relationship, they can be taken as different manifestations from that language. So in a way, in Saussure's terms, this Lange and Perroll, Lange can be taken as the entire structure of reality, social reality, and how various phenomena, they are Perroll's different manifestation. So in this way, Strauss is trying to reach at the unconscious attitudes of kinship and myths, and in this way, he is trying to obtain that objective structure that is behind kinship. For example, he is going to talk about various sets of rules. For example, in every society, there is a kinship system, and kinship system means it decides that who can marry whom and who cannot marry whom, right? So such systems may be homologous with language of society, and in this way he says that in a society there may be different language groups, and so what he is trying to achieve, he is trying to achieve that identical unconscious structures which are at the back of various manifestations of kinship ties in different social groups. So in this way, Strauss shows us a new way of looking at kinship ties, and in that particularly he is focusing on two elements. One is avunculate element, or the role of uncles in primitive societies, and the other point that he is talking about, the exchange of women in primitive societies. And he says that if you look at these two phenomena, they are not casual phenomena. They cannot be taken lightly. They have profound significance. And in this way, we find that how Strauss offers a radical modification of Radcliffe's views. For example, according to Radcliffe-Brown, the term avunculate covers two antithetical systems of attitudes. In one case, the maternal uncle represents family authority. He is feared and obeyed and possesses certain rights over his nephew. In the other case, the nephew holds privileges of familiarity in relation to his uncle and can treat him more or less as his victim. Second, there is a correlation between the boy's attitude towards his maternal uncle and his attitude towards his father. We find the two systems of attitudes in both cases, but they are inversely correlated. In groups where familiarity characterizes the relationship between father and son, the relationship between maternal uncle and nephew is one of respect, and where the father stands as the austere representative of family authority, it is the uncle who is treated with familiarity. So here we find that Strauss is not in agreement with these views, and he says that these two sets of attitudes involved here, they constitute of course two pairs of oppositions, but Strauss is able to offer a radical modification of Radcliffe Brown's views, and he argues that arbitrarily isolates, how Brown arbitrarily isolates particular elements of a global structure which must be treated as whole. So in this way, going beyond the limits of this empirical scheme of Brown, Strauss is interested in dealing with the whole structure and attaining general laws about this structure. For example, he says about Cherkess and Trobriand types of societies. So where he says that in those societies, when we consider them, it is not enough to study the correlation of attitudes between father-son and uncle-sister-son. He says that this correlation is only one aspect of a global system containing basically 4 types of relationship which are organically linked. So these 4 types of relationship are brother-sister, husband-wife, father and son, and mother's brother or sister's son. That is how we can understand it. And he goes on to say that if you look at the 2 groups in our example, they illustrate a law which can be formulated as follows. In both groups, the relation between maternal uncle and nephew is to relationship between brother and sister, as the relationship between father and son is to that between husband and wife. So in this way, we know one pair of relationships. If we know one pair of relations, it is always possible to infer the other. So here we find that how Strauss says that avunculate system is itself structurally determined. So he is, trying to say that the primitive and irreducible character of these kinship ties is direct result of universal presence of an incest taboo, right? So a man, there he makes a point about the exchange of women, that how it becomes necessary that a man must obtain a woman from another man in form of either as daughter of that man or sister of that man, because within family structures there are incest taboos. So in this way he says that maternal uncle in kinship structure is given, which is invisible in the empirical observation of Brown. So in this way he says that this maternal uncle in kinship structure, it is a necessary precondition for the structure to exist. So here we find that how Saussure's methods, they can be distinguished from the traditional anthropological studies, right? So here we find that as Saussure says that we have interpreted the avunculate as a characteristic trait of elementary structure. This elementary structure, which is the product of defined relations involving 4 terms, is in our view true atom of kinship. Nothing can be conceived or given beyond the fundamental requirement of its structure, and in addition, it is the sole building block of more complex system, right? So in this way, we find that how traditional studies, traditional anthropologist studies, they considered the terms only, not relationship between them. The anthropologist does not deal with objectively observed facts of nature, but with those structures that human mind characteristically superimposes on it. So therefore, we find that how he is laying emphasis on arbitrary and systematic character. The kinship system in this way emerges as language, right? So he says that, kinship systems, marriage rules, and descent groups constitute a coordinative whole, the function of which is to ensure the permanency of the social group by means of intertwining consanguineous and affinal ties. They may be considered as the blueprint of a mechanism which pumps women out of their consanguineous families to redistribute them in affinal groups. So, the result of this process being to create new consanguineous groups and so on. So, here we find that from this kind of emphasis on its arbitrary and systematic character, the kinship system emerges clearly as a language. In this way, it is a structured and structuring system of science whose mode is symbolic, self-regulating and self-sufficient, and it does not require any reference to outside reality or external reality or nature which is beyond itself. It is validated by its own uh, procedure, right? So, because they are symbolic systems, kinship systems offer the anthropologist a rich field. That is what Strauss says, right? So, here his efforts can almost converge with those of most highly developed of social sciences, namely linguistics. So, he establishes this relationship between linguist and anthropologist. But to achieve this convergence, from which it is hoped a better understanding of man will result, we must never lose sight of the fact in both anthropological and linguistic research that we are dealing strictly with symbolism. And although it may be legitimate or even inevitable to fall back upon a naturalistic interpretation, in order to understand the emergence of symbolic thinking, once the latter is given, the nature of explanation must change as radically as newly appeared phenomena differs from those which have preceded and prepared it. So, hence we find that any concession to naturalism might jeopardize the immense progress already made in linguistics, which is also beginning to characterize the study of family structure and might drive the sociology of the family towards a sterile empiricism devoid of inspiration. So, in this way, we find that how Strauss efficiently applies the methods of structural linguistics to the study of elementary kinship ties, and in this way he gives a new direction not only to anthropology but also structural linguistics. So, they are inter-animating each other. In the next lecture, we will be talking about the other concepts that Levi-Strauss has taken up, like his study of myth and the savage mind. Thank you.